Hey everybody, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and this is the all-new RadExpand 5. This is Rad's newest iteration on their electric folding bike, and it's replacing the old RadMini 4. Now, obviously there are some changes with this bike. It's got a new frame design, the battery's been moved, and obviously it's also got a new name. But how does it actually perform in the real world? We're going to put it to the test today and find out. When it comes to electric folding bikes, they really fit into one of two different camps. There's the old school variation of electric folding bikes, and then there's the new school variation of electric folding bikes. And really what that boils down to is there's the European version and the American version. Now, when it comes to the old school version of electric bikes, I like to think of them as the European variation of electric folding bike. And that's because Europeans are really ones that pioneered the idea of electric folding bike. They built folding bikes to be very light, very compact, and they've paid a lot of attention to detail of the actual folding mechanism, how quickly you can fold that bike down and begin rolling it onto a subway car, or roll it onto an elevator, or stash it underneath your desk. When it comes to the new school variation of electric bikes, are the ones that we most commonly seen sold in the United States. They're typically much larger, much more close to the size of a traditional electric bike when they're unfolded. They're heavier, and not as much of attention to detail has been paid to how the bike folds. And that's because this type of bike, which the RadExpand 5 definitely fits into this more new school category, it's designed to be a full-size electric bike. It's designed to handle that way, to ride that way, but it's also supposed to fold. Folding comes after the ride quality of a bike like this. And as I mentioned before, the RadExpand 5 absolutely fits into that new school or more American style electric folding bike category. And among all of the electric folding bikes I've personally reviewed, this e-bike seems to be leaning the hardest into the idea of that new school American style of electric folding bikes, or the idea that the folding function comes second to the overall ride quality of the bike. And what I mean by this is that this bike is actually missing some folding features, or at least folding characteristics that we've typically seen on electric folding bikes, notably the big tall handle post and folding pedals. I actually like the fact that it's missing these features. Instead of a big tall handle post, which can be flexy and overly adjustable and really is only compatible with these narrow style handlebars, Rad gave this bike a set of BMX riser style handlebars, which really does a number to the handling characteristic. These bars still fold, but it feels much sturdier than a handle post. And instead of folding pedals, this bike just has standard electric bike pedals on it. These pedals are going to feel a little bit sturdier under your feet. Those folding pedals usually feel fine, but you can feel them just flex a little bit more than what you would experience with these pedals. A bike like this is designed to be folded up and lifted into the back of a sedan, or stowed in a tight place in an RV, or just put in the corner of a garage that it's out of the way. It's not going to be rolled onto an elevator or stashed underneath a desk. It's not built for that, so why spec it with components that are built for that purpose? This bike just serves its function very, very well, and there's some changes that have been made that I think really improves the handling and ride quality. Powering the RadExpand 5 is a 750 watt rear hub motor that's made in-house by Rad, and a 48 volt 14 amp hour battery, or 672 watt hour battery, that sits right above the bottom bracket. Like the old RadMini, the RadExpand 5 is driven by a 7-speed drivetrain. The one that we've got on this bike is from Microshift. It also has mechanical disc brakes, the 180mm rotors front and rear. This setup is from a company called Radius, and we'll dive into how they perform a little bit later in this review. But in a departure from the RadMini, this bike no longer features a suspension fork, and they also don't spec it with an LCD display anymore. Instead, it's got a much simpler LED display that we've seen on a couple of other e-bikes coming out from Rad recently. I actually like that simple display. The RadExpand 5 is spec'd with a set of mechanical disc brakes from a company called Radius. Now, Radius is kind of one of those brands that we don't know as well as, say, a Tektro, but they do seem to perform very, very well. And mechanical disc brakes are not at all uncommon on a bike like this of this price point, and if they're set up correctly, they typically work very well. But to get an idea of how this set specifically works, we're going to put it to the test in our braking test, where we bring the bike up to 20 miles an hour 5 times and slam on the brakes as hard as possible to get an average stopping distance. Let's see how the RadExpand 5 performs. The mechanical disc brakes on the RadExpand 5 performed very well in our braking test, coming to a stop on average in 13 feet and 9 inches, which is quite a bit better than the average stopping distance we've gotten on all the bikes we've put through this test, which is about 15 feet and 7 inches, give or take an inch or two. This is a really nice performing bike in this test, and I like how these brakes feel. They stop well, they control the bike under a skid. It's a good braking e-bike. Rad's given the RadExpand 5 a 48 volt, 14 amp hour or 672 watt hour battery that's mounted on the frame right there above the bottom bracket. Now, that 672 watt hour battery seems to be just the standard for Rad. All of their bikes that we've tested so far, especially in this past year, have been coming with a 672 watt hour battery. And in fact, 672 watt hours seems to be just the battery size of choice for all of Rad's competitors in this category. So that's a very standard battery size. And what we found when we tested the range of this battery is that it gets a very standard range. Now, we did 2 range tests on this bike to get an idea of how far you could ride it on a single charge. The first was in PAS1 to get an idea of if you were being conservative on the motor, and the second in PAS4, which is the bike's maximum pedal assist level, so that would be totally gunning it. And what we found was in PAS1, we got a range of over 48 miles, and in PAS4, we got a range of over 18 miles. So pretty solid results from this bike that really do fall in line with most of its competitors. One thing I will add for those of you who are going to inevitably compare the data between all of these bikes is that 18 and 48 miles is still a really big and long envelope that you could ride this bike on a single charge. I think most people, especially newer riders or those who are shopping around for e-bikes the first time, grossly overestimate the distance they're going to be riding their bikes in a single charge. Let me tell you that 18 miles on full bore with this thing is a really long ways, and 48 miles on PAS1 is a even astronomically longer distance. So don't underestimate how far this bike can go. It's gonna get you a good range. It's going to serve the average e-bike rider very, very well. While most e-bike brands buy their motors from third-party manufacturers and just install them on their bikes, Rad does not. Rad, on the other hand, designs and engineers their motors in-house, and from a performance and especially from a reliability perspective, it does make a difference. Rad has done a very good job, and they take a lot of pride in designing their motors in-house. That's obviously something to keep in mind. Now, the RadExpand 5 is built around a 750 watt rear hub motor. It's got 4 levels of pedal assist. A lot of e-bikes, including a lot of other Rad e-bikes, come with 5. This one comes with 1 less. And it also uses a twist style throttle on the right side of the handlebars. All of these different motor assist levels are capped at 20 miles an hour. So this is a class 2 e-bike. We did test how the bike performed in each of its 4 pedal assist levels, and what we found was a very nice delineation of power between pedal assist 1 and then increasing that power and speed all the way up to pedal assist 4. So if you're a rider and you want to be able to control how much energy that motor is putting out at any given time, you can do that with this bike. We also did a lap around our electric bike report circuit with no help from the motor at all, and as you'd kind of expect from a bike like this, it does have fatter tires. It's a folding bike. It's fairly heavy. It doesn't pedal all that well without help from the motor. It's not a bike that I would really suggest running out of battery and going out and riding on its own unless you're looking for some sort of challenge. But all in, the Rad motors are very high performing. They're very good motors. They typically perform on the mellower side of the spectrum. They're very controlled. They're very predictable. You really know what you're going to get from it when you twist the throttle or step on the pedals. The motor is actuated, other than by using the throttle, using a cadence sensor, which really functions as just kind of like an on and off switch that tells the motor whether you're pedaling and you want assistance from the motor, or whether you're coasting and you want the motor to cut off. With cadence sensors, we sometimes find a lag in that engagement. This one doesn't lag very much. It's really, really common to get some sort of lag, but this one's very, very short. Within about a half of a pedal stroke, that motor kicks on or off, which is really a good performing cadence sensor. So all in, this bike's power plant, its drivetrain, its motor, really, really nice setup. One thing that's notably missing on the RadExpand 5 that we saw on the previous RadMini 4 is a suspension fork. This bike is fully rigid, which means any bump, any road vibration is going to get transmitted directly from the ground and into your body. Now, I think there are some pros and cons to this decision to nix the fork. On the con side, obviously you're gonna feel more. This bike we're gonna ride a little bit rougher than the RadMini 4. The RadMini 4 came with a very small suspension fork, but it was suspension nonetheless. It was enough to take the edge off of bumps in the road, or if you were needing to ride over a curb or just hit a pothole unexpectedly. On this version of the bike, the only sort of suspension you've got are those fatter tires. This is where tire pressure becomes very, very key. Set appropriately, these fatter tires are going to be able to absorb a little bit of that road vibration and help take the edge off. But don't set the pressure too low, or you risk getting a pinch flat where the bump in the road actually impacts the rim and you get what's called a snake bite tear in the tube. On the pros side, the lack of a suspension fork does simplify the bike and remove one of the most failure-prone components, especially on a budget e-bike like this. I personally take the latter of this pros and cons. I believe that the lack of a suspension fork on this bike is a pro. Not only does it help keep this bike affordable, again, this thing only costs about $1,500 MSRP. That's very, very cheap for an e-bike. It's going to ensure that this bike will stick around and keep performing as you want it to for the long run. I cannot stress how often I see a suspension fork on a budget electric bike just absolutely degrade in performance or flat out break. And it also happens a lot quicker than you'd expect. This bike isn't going to do that. It's going to keep going for a long time. And I also think you'd be very surprised at just how comfortable a rigid e-bike can be, especially one like this that's designed primarily to stick on pavement. Yes, you can take it off-road, but its happy place is really going to be on pavement. And in that respect, suspension really is just kind of an added accessory. You don't need it, and I think you're going to be surprisingly comfortable on a bike like this. The next thing I want to point to on the RadExpand 5 is another thing that we normally see on affordable electric folding bikes, but is missing on this one. But in this case, there's no point in talking about pros and cons, because in this instance, it's a definite pro. This is a huge improvement in my opinion, and that's the fact that this bike is missing a handle post. Now, a handle post is this big, tall stock. It's adjustable up and down. It's the part that makes the handlebars fold down on a folding bike, but it's usually flexy, it's rattly. That adjustable mechanism just isn't totally necessary, and it adds another flex point into the bike. And then usually we see these handle posts paired with these flat, straight, and very narrow handlebars that quicken the handling of these small tire e-bikes that already have very quick handling. There's just, in my opinion, a lot of cons outweighing the pros of using a handle post, but we don't even have to talk about that because this bike doesn't have one. Instead, Rad has fitted it with these BMX-style handlebars that are wider than average for electric folding bikes, and they're stiffer. It still folds down. It's got a nice folding mechanism, one that I've never really seen before. It's similar than a handle post, but this one looks to be proprietary to Rad, and it's stiff, it doesn't rattle, it feels like a normal e-bike, not like you're riding a bike that's designed to fold up. I really think it's done volumes for how well this bike performs. And in fact, I would argue that the RadExpand 5 is probably the best handling electric folding bike that I've personally reviewed, simply because of this bar change. It's made that big of a difference. Lastly, I want to talk about how the RadExpand 5 performs off-road. Rad markets it as a bike that is capable of going off-road. It uses knobbier tires. This style of e-bike has become very popular with the RV and national park hopping crowd, and I would imagine that many of you watching this video are envisioning some sort of adventure in the dirt using this style of e-bike. So can the RadExpand 5 go off-road? Yes, it can go off-road, but there are some limitations and things you need to consider. To put it short, I'd assess the RadExpand 5 as being capable on smooth gravel paths, dirt shoulders, and maintained dirt roads. Basically, anywhere that you can take a stock standard Subaru Outback. You're not talking about really crazy 4x4 roads. You're not talking about single track trail. This is going to take you out into the dirt, but it's not going to go that far. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One, these knobby tires do grip well. That definitely helps with its off-road performance, but this bike has no sort of suspension. You're really going to feel the variable terrain that you're riding over. And then lastly, and perhaps more importantly, this is an affordable e-bike built with affordable componentry. And a lot of that componentry, regardless of how the bike is designed or marketed, the componentry that's hanging on the frame that actually makes it all work is designed for pavement primarily. It's not designed to go and play in the dirt and be able to withstand all of the things that go along with playing in the dirt. I'm talking about rocks and drops and little jumps and really bumpy roads for sustained amount of time. That's all going to take a toll on the components that hang on the frame that Rad designed. So these are things to keep in mind. You can absolutely take the bike off-road. You take this thing to a national park, you're going to be able to explore every single fire road and dirt road that you can get your hands on. But it's probably not going to be the best one to take on a rockier trail or a 4x4 road where you'd maybe need a lifted Jeep to get around. But all of those things considered, especially considering the handlepost and the bike's frame and how comfortable it is, this is a really nice riding e-bike. I've really enjoyed the RadExpand 5. It's just comfortable, it works well. They did a really good job with it. The RadExpand 5 is powered by a 750 watt rear hub motor that's made in-house by Rad. Now, to get an idea of how this rear hub motor performs uphill, which, let's be real, is almost everyone's first question when they ask how well an e-bike performs, we're going to put it to the test on our test hill Hellhole. Now, Hellhole is a 12% gradient on average. It's 1/3 of a mile long. It's very big, it's very long, it's very steep, and it's plenty big, long, and steep to put a bike like this, or really any e-bike we're going to test, to its limits. So let's see how the RadExpand 5 performs. So this is the throttle-only test of the RadExpand 5. See how this bike goes up Hellhole with no help from my legs. So Rad's motors, at least its most recent batch of motors we've been testing this year, all tend to do super similar in our hill test, like shockingly similar. So I'm really curious to see if the Expand follows that trend. I will say, really don't seem to be having much issue on the throttle. Not surprising considering it's a 750 watt motor. Probably not going to be the quickest throttle only time we've seen up Hellhole, but it's doing just fine. No sort of groaning from the motor, odd vibrations, stuff that would indicate it's struggling. It's just kind of plugging away. Really like that about Rad's stuff, is they've done a good job of engineering it to be kind of tight and reliable. Sometimes I feel like I'm hurting motors on Hellhole just because it's so steep and it goes on for so long. I don't ever feel like that with Rad's. Nice relaxing lap of one of the steepest hills in our area. go up hellhole on the RadExpand 5. This time in PS4. Oh, that's a big chuckwalla. Big lizard. This time in PS4, which is the Expand's max pedal assist level. As always, when you add in just a little bit of help from your legs, noticing a pretty considerable difference on this first steep section of the hill. This bike doesn't have a LCD display, so I don't know how fast I'm going, but going pretty good. It's going to be a pretty solid time from the RadExpand 5. Just like all the other Rads. Probably not a record-setting time, but I'm always impressed when any bike makes it up this hill with any degree of ease, because it's not an easy one. So the RadExpand 5 did very well in our test up hellhole. We did 2 timed laps up the hill, the first using just the throttle and the second using PS4, which is the bike's maximum pedal assist level. And in the throttle only portion of the test, it made it to the top in 1 minute and 44 seconds with an average speed of 11.7 miles an hour. And using PS4 with the help of my legs, that time decreased to 1 minute and 14 seconds with an average speed of 14.1 miles per hour. So really solid results from this e-bike. Honestly, one thing I really always like to sing the praises of when it comes to reviewing a Rad e-bike is just how quiet that motor is when going uphill. There's no indication it's struggling. It does lose speed. It's not ever really a speed demon uphill, but man, does it just stay totally silent. There's no indication that you're harming the motor, which we actually do get that indication on some of the bikes we put up hellhole, but this thing just feels like you could go up and down a hill that steep all day without really impacting the performance of the bike. So really big kudos to the RadExpand 5 uphill. Aside from the opener of this video, I haven't spent a lot of time talking about the RadExpand 5's folding abilities, and that was actually on purpose. It's not for any bad reason or because Rad designed this bike with the folding mechanism as an afterthought, but rather, unlike some of the Euro fast folders that just really put an insane amount of engineering and thought and even compromise on the bike into how well it folds up and how portable it is, this bike doesn't do that. Instead of building a bike that folds but can also be a pretty fun e-bike, Rad has built a really fun e-bike that also folds. This bike's ride quality comes first, and I really think Rad did a good job of doing that. They've obviously foregone some of the kind of more hallmark features of a folding e-bike that we'd normally expect to see, things like the handle post and folding pedals, and I actually give Rad quite a bit of credit for going out on a limb and doing that. It really has improved how this bike performs. It's improved how this bike rides. And after folding it up and transporting it around in the back of my own Subaru Outback, I don't think it's really impacted how well the bike functions as a folding e-bike. It still folds down compactly. You can still lift it up and putting it into the back of the car. And even though it doesn't have any sort of built-in retention system to hold the two parts of the frame together when it actually is folded, Rad went just a little bit further than some of its competitors, included a nice Velcro strap to hold the thing together. So Rad is thinking about how the bike folds, but first and foremost on Rad's mind is how this bike rides. And I think they've done a really great job of building a very nice riding e-bike. I've really enjoyed my time on it. If you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more updates on Rad Power Bikes and the other e-bike brands that we cover. And also be sure to click the link in the description below this video if you want more details on the data we collected on the RadExpand 5. For Electric Bike Report, I'm Sam Gross. Thank you so much for watching.